Hello and welcome to this edition of Back in History. In Back in History, we take you back in time to the events that occurred in the historical past. We also document the profiles of persons who have made indelible marks on the sands of time in the course of history. Today we present the story of one of Nigeria's foremost politicians, independence advocate, and an administrator par excellence, Chief Ladoke Akintola. He began his political career with like minds such as Chief Awolowo, but along the way, these two political gladiators of the western region of Nigeria extraction fell apart seriously and became rivals in the politics of western Nigeria. It is not clear if they had settled their differences privately before their departure to the great beyond. Chief Akintola was still in his vibrancy and still full of life, and certainly not done with politics and administration when his life was cut short by the bullets of the planners and executors of Nigeria's first military coup, which was staged in January 1966. It was a bloody coup by every description, with scores of very important persons in politics, civil service, and the military sent to early graves. Ladoke Akintola was one of the victims, and his death remains painful to many till this day. Akintola was an enigma of a man. He was a Baptist-led preacher, a Yoruba fundamentalist, eloquent speaker, former editor of daily service newspaper, school teacher, railway worker, attorney at law, a brilliant administrator, and the second and last premier of the western region of Nigeria. This video takes you round the trajectory of his life from his birth to his untimely death. He was only 56 years old at the time of his death. Welcome to this edition of Back in History. Samuel Akintola was born on 10th July 1910 into a family whose attributes were wealth, valor, courage, and bravery. His father was Akintola Akimbola. His mother was Akonke. His father Akintola was a trader who descended from a family of traders. In their ancestry, trading had become a highly rewarding and profitable venture with tangible wealth to show. Ladoke was born into wealth. He was born in Ogbomoso in present-day Oyo State of Nigeria. Trading took his father from place to place, and in his later trading life, his father took the decision to move to Minna in present-day Niger State and settled there with his family. The young Ladoke Akintola moved with his parents to Minna. While in Minna, he attended the Church Missionary Society School. While there, he associated freely with Hausa Fulani children, and in the process, he understood and spoke the Hausa language fluently. His understanding of this language would later prove highly beneficial to him in his future political life, particularly during his political alignment with the North. In 1922, his father considered it imperative that the young Ladoke Akintola should grow up with a blend of the Yoruba culture and that the child should not be alienated from home. He then sent Ladoke back to Ogbomoso to live with his grandfather. Ladoke moved back home and lived with the grandfather, who was an uncompromising disciplinarian. While there, Ladoke attended Baptist Day School before proceeding to Baptist College in Lagos in 1925. While in these schools, Ladoke was known by everyone as an intelligent student. He had the gift of oratory and held people spellbound whenever he had the floor. From 1930 to 1942, Ladoke served as a teacher at the Baptist Academy and was a member of the Baptist Teachers Union. From Baptist Academy, he later gained employment at the Nigerian Railway Corporation. He worked there for a while, and while there, he met with H.O. Davies, who was already a lawyer, politician, and nationalist. H.O. Davies was one of the leading lights in Nigeria's agitation for independence. He was of the same era with the likes of Nnamdi Azikiwe, Jaja Nwachukwu, Obafemi Awolowo, Herbert Macaulay, and others, while Professor Eyoita, the first professor in Black Africa, was the galvanizing factor and leader of the early nationalist movement in Nigeria. Ladoke Akintola became very close to H.O. Davis, and in the course of their friendship, Davis introduced him to the Nigerian youth movement, which was founded by Professor Oyoita. At the youth movement, Ladoke Akintola became more acquainted with nationalist ideas and joined voices with others to agitate for Nigeria's independence from Britain. In 1943, Ladoke Akintola left the Railway Corporation and joined the Daily Service newspaper, which was one of the leading newspapers at the time. He did remarkably well in this media house and soon became the editor of the newspaper. Ladoke also founded his own newspaper named Iroyin Yoruba. This was the first newspaper in Nigeria to be published 100% in an indigenous language, and the paper was very popular among the Yoruba people in Lagos and beyond. In 1946, Ladoke Akintola earned a British scholarship to study law in the United Kingdom. He completed his studies in 1949 and was called to the Nigerian bar. He then returned to Nigeria and began his legal career. In 1952, he formed a partnership with Chief Chris Ogumbanjo and Chief Bode Thomas and Michael Udesanya. The law partnership became well known and attracted several clients cutting across the various divides of the Nigerian society. It was one of the first known legal partnerships in Nigeria's history. Ladoke Akintola soon developed interest in politics and began to associate with like minds. At this time, he was a full-fledged barrister with a thriving law practice. He knew that Nigeria will one day and soon become an independent country, and that the need will surely arise for the indigenous people of Nigeria to assume the political leadership of their country. He then teamed up with like minds to form the Action Group. This was a political movement led by educated Nigerians from the western region of Nigeria. By agreement of its founders, Obafemi Awolowo emerged as the leader of the Action Group, while Ladoke Akintola emerged as the legal advisor. In 1953, Ladoke Akintola climbed up the ladder and became the national deputy leader of the group. The group worked really strong, and soon Action Group became a force to reckon with. Eventually, some windows were opened by the colonial government, allowing the indigenous people of Nigeria to take part in leadership, especially at the legislature. The House of Representatives of Nigeria was created at the center in Lagos, while the House of Assembly was created at the regions. Ladoke Akintola won election on the platform of the Action Group to the House of Representatives at the center in Lagos. While there, he served as Minister of Health and later served as Minister of Communication and Aviation. While in charge of the aviation sector, Ladoke Akintola was instrumental to the founding of Nigerian Airways. In 1958, he traveled to Holland to source for airplanes for Nigeria Airways. Ladoke did so well in the offices he occupied. While Akintola was at the center in the House of Representatives, Obafemi Awolowo was at the region as the Premier of the Western Region. At this time, Ladoke Akintola and Obafemi Awolowo had no issues. They worked together for development and did so harmoniously. As independence became more realistic, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, Premier of the Western Region, relinquished his seat as Premier and moved to the center in the hope of gaining the needed majority to become the Premier and leader of the highly anticipated new country. Unfortunately, his party, the Action Group, could not secure the needed majority. Awolowo then became officially the leader of opposition at the center. At this time, Nigeria practiced parliamentary democracy. Ladoke Akintola, a serving member of the Federal House of Representatives and deputy leader of the Action Group, was asked by his party, the Action Group, to vacate his seat at the House of Representatives and return home to contest election to the State House of Assembly for him to succeed Awolowo as Premier of the Western region. A Loyalist Party member was made to vacate his seat, and Akintola emerged unopposed as candidate from Ogbomoso South-East State constituency. As a result of the failure of the Action Group to form government at the center in 1959, Alhaji Tafawa Balewa then formed the government of Nigeria. Ladoke Akintola, having now become a member of the Western House of Assembly, was officially called upon by the governor of the Western region, Sir John Rankin, to form a government by 15th December 1959. Ladoke then relocated from Lagos to Ibadan to serve as Premier of the Western region. Ladoke Akintola had no private home in Ibadan and had not lived in Ibadan before except as a visitor. Chief Obafemi Awolowo, all through his period as Premier of Western region, did not live in government house but lived in his house at Okebola, Ibadan. There was then the need to look for accommodation that would serve as the Premier's lodge for Ladoke Akintola. By March 1960, a disused and dingy house formerly used by one of the colonial masters was discovered and refurbished in the Yaganku government residential area, which then became the Premier's Lodge. Ladoke lived in this house as Premier between March 1960 and January 1966, when the volley of bullets were hurled at him by the military coup plotters of 1966. History has it that the group that invaded Ladoke's residence was led by Captain Nwobusi of military barracks Abeokuta. Ladoke Akintola was brutally murdered in the invasion. In an irony of history, the Premier's Lodge, where Akintola's life was cut short, later became the Court of Appeal Ibadan Division, until recently when it relocated to the new Court of Appeal complex at Dioyo, Ibadan. The period between 1960 and 1966 were periods of the greatest political upheavals, intrigues, power play, subterfuge, innuendos, and deep hatred in the Western region of Nigeria. Chief Obafemi as former Premier and Chief Ladoke Akintola as incumbent Premier soon became political enemies. It got to a point that Chief Akintola no more went to Awolowo's house at Okebola for political meetings, as had always been the case. He insisted that all political meetings must be held at the Premier's Lodge. This, Chief Obafemi Awolowo found very insulting and embarrassing. Some analysts have stated that the feud between Awolowo and Akintola is also traceable to their wives. Ladoke's wife was Chief Mrs. Federera Ladoke, while Awolowo's wife was Chief Mrs. H.I.D. Awolowo. While her husband was a Premier of the region, Mrs. Awolowo was a major distributor of certain commodities, and Coca-Cola was the number one of the items she distributed in the region. But when Chief Awolowo went to Lagos as opposition leader, Mrs. Federera Akintola insisted on taking distributorship of these products because of the belief that it was her right as the wife of the new Premier, but Mrs. Awolowo would not let go of her distributorship. The Coca-Cola warfare and acrimony then spilled to the party, where Awolowo saw Akintola as a rebel and a betrayer, and on the other hand, the Akintola group saw Awolowo as being too dictatorial. Many other factors also led to the crisis. Gradually, the cracks within the Action Group were widened as a result of the rift between Akintola and Awolowo. On the 27th day of May 1966, 66 members of the House of Assembly out of 112 members passed a vote of no confidence on the Premier, which was to be concretized by a meeting of the House to debate the vote of no confidence. The session of the House was disrupted. The Speaker of the House, Honorable Adeleke Adedoyin, after summoning the House to an emergency session, had barely spoken after the introduction of the motion by Chief Adebiyi when Honorable S.A. Tinubu from Iresi in present-day Ogun State grabbed a handbell, ringing the bell non-stop and causing commotion in the house. Honorable Emmanuel Ibubedike, an Igbo man from Ozubulu in present-day Anambra State, representing a Jerome Badagry Ifelodun constituency, grabbed the mace and broke it into pieces, whilst Chief Adebiyi took a chair and hit Honorable Kensington Momo on the head, which also narrowly missed the Speaker, Honorable Adeleke's head. As this was going on, Honorable E.O.O.K. from Ogbomoso Southwest constituency started shouting, "Fire on the mountain! Fire on the mountain!" There was mayhem and pandemonium. At this point, two premiers had emerged, Chief Ladoke Akintola and Alhaji Dauda Adegbenro. Akintola had earlier been removed by the governor of the Western Region, Governor Desoji Aderemi, on the ground that he could no longer command the support of majority of members of the House of Assembly following the interpretation of Section 33 sub 10 of the Western Region of Nigerian Constitution, which stated that, quote, the governor can remove the premier when it appears to him that the premier no longer commands the respect of majority members of the House of Assembly. Chief Dauda Adegbenro had thus been announced as the new premier. Akintola physically fought his removal. On the orders of the governor, the office of the premier was locked amidst tight security. Chief Lekon Salami, personally in the full glare of the public and the press, broke down the door of the office of the premier to allow him access to the office. This incident was popularly referred to as Akintola Taku, meaning Akintola refuses to go, which was also named after a stubborn lemongrass. The situation degenerated and something needed to be done urgently. On 29th May 1962, following this disorder in the Western Region, the federal government headed by Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa dissolved the Western Nigeria House of Assembly, imposed an emergency rule on the Western Region under the Emergency Power Act 1962, and appointed his personal physician, friend and Minister of Health, Dr. Moses Majekudumi, as administrator of Western Region till further notice. The administrator placed restriction orders on prominent politicians in the Western Region. Chief Obafemi was restricted. Chief Samuel Ladoke Akintola was also restricted. Chief Rosiji and Chief F.R.A. Williams were also restricted. In 1962, Chief Samuel Ladoke Akintola took the matter of his removal to the High Court under Justice Kwashi Ido, a Ghanaian, then as the Chief Judge of the Western Region of Nigeria. The Chief Judge refused to listen to the matter and rather sent it to the Federal Supreme Court for interpretation of Section 33 sub 10 of the Constitution of the Western Region. The Federal Supreme Court interpreted the section in favor of Akintola and declared his removal as null and void. Alhaji Dauda Adegbenro filed an appeal to the Privy Council in London. It was upheld that the governor had the right in his capacity to remove Akintola as premier, but Akintola, in a surprise political maneuvering, convened an emergency meeting of the House of Assembly and passed a law which amended Section 114 of the Western Region Constitution by abolishing appeals from the Western Region going beyond the Supreme Court of Nigeria. Adegbenro's victory dance was therefore aborted. In January 1963, Chief Samuel Ladoke Akintola came back as Premier of the Western Region with his new party, UPP, with a new major agreement with NCNC, which later metamorphosed into NNDP. A new office of Deputy Premier was created for the NCNC in accordance with the major understanding, and Chief Remi Fani-Kayode, an equally brilliant lawyer, emerged as Deputy Premier. The remnants of the Action Group and the NCNC equally entered into a major agreement to form UPGA. Politics in the Western Region was becoming increasingly wild and dangerous, leading to the appellation Wild Wild West. Awolowo had been jailed in 1963 for treason and sent to Calabar prison. The last 3 years of Chief Ladoke Akintola became very rough, very tough, and stormy. After winning the 1965 election, he was called by the governor, Sir Father Honsi, to form the new government in October 1965. His tape-recorded acceptance speech and message to the people of Western Region to be rebroadcast by the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation had been removed and replaced with another recorded message by a mystery gunman who stepped into the studio and made his own broadcast, denouncing Akintola's victory, and this mystery gunman was Wole Soyinka. Soyinka was arrested and charged to court before the then newly appointed judge of the High Court of Western Region, Justice Kayode Esho, as he then was and later retired Justice of the Supreme Court of Nigeria. Samuel Ladoke Akintola's former partner in chambers, Michael Odesanya, later a judge, was Wole Soyinka's defending attorney. There was widespread arson and killing of people known to be supporters of Awolowo or Akintola. Indeed, the situation in the Western Region was far from pleasant. It was turbulent in every material particular. Akintola was disillusioned, more so as he had lost his first daughter to the cold hands of death in a rather inexplicable way. Chief Samuel Ladoke Akintola was in this state of disillusionment when, on the 13th of January 1966, he went along with Chief R.O.A. Akinjide, then NNDP Secretary General and Minister for Education, to meet with the Premier of the Northern Region, Ahmadu Bello, and also the Prime Minister, Tafawa Balewa, with Lieutenant Colonel Bogo Lagema of the Ibadan Garrison, also at the meeting. He, like a clairvoyant, warned the Premier and the Prime Minister of the impending doom. On the 14th of January 1966, he told his wife, Faderera, to proceed to Ogbomoso residence for a private visit of Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, who was on an official visit to Nigeria. The British Prime Minister Harold Wilson, at the Commonwealth Prime Ministers Conference in Lagos in January 1966, warned the host of the conference of an impending military insurrection and offered the Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa asylum in one of the British warships in the Atlantic Ocean. The Prime Minister rebuffed this intelligence and considered the fears and apprehensions as mere hearsay and unfounded. In essence, Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa did not believe that there was a coup in the offing against him or against any political leader in Nigeria. In the early hours of 15th January 1966, the military struck, and after picking Deputy Premier Fani Kayode in the same Yagangu neighborhood, moved to the Premier's lodge where Akintola was shot and killed. Fani Kayode was lucky; he was spared. On the same day, Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa, Minister of Finance Okoti Ebo, and Sir Ahmadu Bello, one of his wives, and some military officers like Brigadier Demalogun, Colonel Ralph Shodeinde, Lieutenant Colonel Abogo Lagema, Commander of the Ibadan Battalion, and several other officers were killed. This marked the violent end of the First Republic in Nigeria and the beginning of military interregnum that did not end effectively until 1999. It is worth mentioning that the Premier of the Eastern Region of Nigeria, Dr. Michael Okpara, the Premier of the Midwestern Region, Dennis Osadebe, and the Ceremonial President of Nigeria, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, were not touched by the massacre. Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe had earlier before the massacre gone on a medical vacation before the army struck on the 15th of January 1966. Chief Ladoke Akintola was later buried in his compound in Ogbomoso on 23rd January 1966, with the entire community wearing a sad, sober, and mournful look. Nigeria had indeed lost a consummate politician. Chief Samuel Ladoke Akintola was a federalist in a pluralist society and had always requested the national government to reflect all shades of opinion, even whilst serving as editor of the daily service. He believed in a federalist society where the Hausa Fulani of the northwest would relate freely with the Yorubas of the southwest and the Igbos of southeastern Nigeria and the Efiks and Ijaws of the south-south Nigeria. Some analysts have argued that if Chief Awolowo had not relinquished his position of premier with the ambition of becoming prime minister in 1960, Ladoke Akintola would probably have remained a federalist and national politician. Others have stated that his emergence as premier of the western region offered him a unique opportunity of affecting his people more directly. But judging from the positions he held before becoming premier and from his alliance with the UPN, his advocacies for the alignment of the West with the other regions, and his general political disposition, one may be right in describing Chief Ladoke Akintola as a politician with a nationalistic mindset. He believed in the growth and development of the Western region where he served as premier, but also believed that the West was better off aligning with others across the country. Some persons disliked Chief Ladoke Akintola for his face-off with Chief Obafemi Awolowo, which later degenerated into a full-blown crisis. Others admired him so greatly and saw him as a towering political figure who did his best in his times in office. Chief Ladoke Akintola was known for his intellect, eloquence, commitment to education, general development, and many more. He was one of the leading political figures by every assessment. At Chief Akintola's first appearance in the House of Assembly after emerging as a premier, the leader of the House, Honorable J.O. Adebiyi, described Akintola as, quote, a man of varied careers who has been a teacher, a journalist, a lawyer, before his exalted position as head of government. He is known for sincerity, loyalty to a cause, and assiduity. He was an interesting debater whose humor and diction in English and Yoruba command great respect. End of quote. The opposition leader in the Western region, Honorable Dennis Osadebe, in seconding the remarks of Honorable Adebiyi's description of Ladoke Akintola, added thus, quote, when the history of the present generation comes to be written, the new premier will be remembered for the part he played in Nigeria's independence. Chief Obafemi Awolowo, after the London Conference of 1953, described Samuel Ladoke Akintola as, quote, an able lawyer, a brazen and affable character who cannot be rebuffed easily, if at all. Chief Obafemi added, quote, his peculiar gift consists in his capacity to argue and defend two opposing points of view with equal competence and plausibility. This quality, backed by a sense of humor and his capacity for nuances, makes him a puzzle to opponents. End of quote. It should be noted that this remark was made by Chief Obafemi Awolowo long before things fell apart between the two personalities. The Sardauna of Sokoto, Sir Ahmadu Bello, once described Akintola as, quote, being quick and friendly and interested in all around him. End of quote. At his funeral in Ogbomoso, tons of tributes poured in like rainwater from several persons. His death was a horrific event, and his funeral was not a time to do politics. It was a sober moment for all. He will be remembered by many across Nigeria and Africa for many years to come. He was indeed a Colossus. Thanks for watching this edition of Back in History, and do remember to subscribe to this channel or follow the page for regular notification on every new video. I remain your friend and host, Ekemi Udim, wishing you the best of time as you continue to accompany me through the rich historical narratives of the continent of Africa.